Hello everybody and welcome back to another video by Funland Tutorials. So let's have a quick recap about the Jones 1965 model. Now one question arises, how do I remember the Jones 1965 model? We know that there are 4 equations in the Jones 1965 model. So the question is, do I remember the 4 equations? Let me use a smaller pen so that the writing is a little more readable. So there are 4 equations in the model. So the question is, do I remember the 4 equations? Yes, of course you can do that. But how I remember is using a picture. So let me think. What are the 2 sectors in the economy that the Jones 1965 model considers? There's an agricultural sector and there's a manufacturing sector. Right. So there's an agricultural sector and a manufacturing sector. And what are the 2 factor endowments in the economy? The 2 factors are basically there's something called the labor, which is represented by L, and then there's something called capital. So we have K. So we have something called capital, which is represented by K. These are the 2 factors that we have in the economy. So basically the economy has 2 sectors, which is agricultural sector. So we have agricultural sector and we have a manufacturing sector. Now what? Remember, the labor goes into both sectors. So you have labor moving into the 2 sectors and you have capital moving to the 2 sectors, right? So now let's think about the equations. So let's consider first how the factors are being used. So what is the total labor found in the economy? The total labor in the economy is, say, L bar. Now, how much labor is used by the agricultural sector? That depends. What does it depend on? That depends upon the input coefficient. So agriculture, so we have L, or let's say you want to write the factors first. So you write A, L, A. What does that mean? That means the coefficient associated with the labor that moves in the agricultural sector. This is the unit input coefficient. What do I mean by that? One unit of production of agricultural output requires this much amount of labor, right? So okay, now let's assume that this agricultural sector produces XA amount of output in the economy, and this manufacturing sector produces M amount of agricultural and M amount of XM amount of manufacturing units. So if ALA is the amount of input required by the agricultural sector for one output, then given that the economy produces XA amounts, you will need XA amount of labor plus this is the labor demanded by the agricultural sector. So if you look at the manufacturing sector, you have ALM, the labor required by the manufacturing sector for one unit, into the total output of the manufacturing sector, which is XM. Quickly, K bar is then equal to AKA, which is the capital moving into the agricultural sector, into XA. So because this is K, this has to be K, plus AKM into XM. These are the 2 output equations or the endowment equations. Then you have price. How is price determined? You see, for these 2, you look at where the output is going, where the factor is going. For the price equations, you see what are the factors that are coming into a particular sector. So let's look at the agricultural sector first. When you consider the agricultural sector, you see how much labor is being taken. So PA is the price of one input, price of one output. Sorry, PA is the price of one output unit of the agricultural sector. Now, what are the inputs being used for this? You use labor. So you have ALA. Let me just write that W, it is the function of W and R. Now L. So that factor income associated will be W, which is the wage rate, plus A. Agricultural sector also uses capital. So you have AKA, which is a function of W and R, And because you are using capital, you have to consider the factor income for capital, which is the interest rate. Quickly, PM, which is the manufacturing sector, uses what input? A, L, M. It uses labor, right? Manufacturing sector also uses labor, which is a function of R. And W, because that is the factor income for labor. Then you also have capital being used in the manufacturing sector, which is a function of W and R, and that is multiplied with R because you're considering the capital in the manufacturing sector. And then you have the two price equations. So you have the two factor endowments and the two price equations. And that is how you can remember the equations of the Jones 1965 model. So you don't need to remember this entire model. You can just remember this picture, and this picture will give you both the equations. So for these equations, you see how these orange, you basically consider one of these sectors, and then you see how that particular factor is moving into the two sectors. And for these equations, you consider one sector and you see how factors are moving into that particular sector. So basically that is how you can remember the Jones 1965 model.